Hi, I'm Joe Feeks, editor of Pig Health Today, and with me is Derald Holtkamp. He's a veterinarian and associate professor at Iowa State University. Always good to see you, Derald.
Thanks, Joe. Good to be here.
Now, I know you've been doing work with transboundary diseases, but just to help everybody in our audience get on the same page, we talk about transboundary diseases, emerging diseases, foreign animal diseases. Are these all the same or are they different?
Well, they're not exactly the same. The meanings overlap a bit. So when we talk about transboundary disease, really we're talking about diseases that are already out there in the world, but not here in the U.S. And so we're worried about them crossing our borders and coming into the U.S. A good example of that, of course, would be PED virus that hit in the U.S. in 2013. That virus had been in China and Europe and other countries for quite a long time before it made its way across the border into the U.S. And so that's our most recent example of a transboundary disease.
Isn't that in effect a foreign animal disease then, if it came in from China and we didn't have it before?
Yes, so a foreign animal disease would do the same thing, except those are the ones that would cause us to lose some of our trade, and so we call them trade-limiting diseases. And so foreign animal diseases, really we can think of those as a special class of transboundary diseases that we're particularly nervous about.
What are you nervous about right now?
Foreign animal diseases, of course, are our biggest concern, again, because we would lose some of our trading, if not all of our export markets. And given that we export about 25% of our pork today, and by all accounts that's trending upward, it would be devastating if we were to lose that overnight.
Now, you are working on a program called the Rapid Response Emerging Disease, RRED. What's that all about? Is that focused on foreign animal disease or transboundary?
Transboundary diseases, right? If we were to get a foreign animal disease, and by the way, we can list those are really probably foot and mouth disease, classical swine fever, and African swine fever are the ones we're worried about. If we were to get one of those, because USDA would take the lead on those. So what we're more worried about are transboundary diseases, and so things like PED, for example. I think everybody sort of acknowledges that when PED did hit in 2013, as an industry, we just weren't prepared to deal with that. We didn't have anybody that could go out and investigate these cases and try to figure out how it was being transmitted from herd to herd. And so as a consequence, it spread throughout the U.S. fairly quickly.
So tell me more about the project. What exactly are you trying to do to ensure this rapid response?
In response to PED, the National Pork Board, of course, funded the development of the Swine Health Information Center. Part of what Dr. Paul Sundberg, as the director of that information center, one of the things he wanted to do was to develop this capability in the U.S. For the industry to go out and rapidly or very quickly investigate cases of a transboundary disease. If we could do that, we then maybe could figure out how it got in the U.S. But then we also want to slow it down, right? We want to try to figure out early on how it might be moving from herd to herd. And if we can do that, we might have some hope of getting on top of it and slowing or stopping the spread of it. And so that's the idea. And one of the things that I think we were all challenged with PED was, it wasn't anybody's job. There wasn't any sort of program to do that. And so Paul, I think, recognized that and then funded us at Iowa State to develop that rapid response program.
So essentially you're targeting biosecurity gaps, is that right?
That's actually a great way to say it, and that's how we often say it, is that when we go out and do these investigations, that's what we're looking for, is we're looking for gaps. We're looking for ways that, given the evidence, and we try to dig pretty hard to find the evidence, what were the likely ways it was transmitted that caused that specific outbreak.
So in your investigations, what are some of the most common biosecurity gaps that you see?
Part of the reason I think Paul had asked us to do this program is we've been doing a lot of investigations for PRRS under a different program that was funded by the Iowa Pork Producers Association. And so this goes back all the way to 2013. And really the foundation of what we're doing for this rapid response program comes from that, from what we've learned in doing that. And since we had developed kind of a standard approach and template for doing investigations starting at the end of 2014, early 2015, we've done about 17, well, we've done more than that, but we have 17 in our database now, investigations of PRRS outbreaks. And so one of the things we do is for each one of those, we do these along the lines of risk events. And so, for example, entry of semen is considered a risk event, or entry of an employee would be considered a risk event. And so when we look at those, we always make some subjective assessment then of what the most likely routes of most likely risk events that were involved in that particular outbreak. And in 8 of the 17 cases, we had employee entry and call sow removal. Came up 8 of the 17 times as being high likely. The next on the list was repairs done inside the barn. And so while that's an event that doesn't occur as frequently, it seems like when it does occur, we've had several cases, a couple in particular, where we consider more or less smoking guns, where the evidence lined up almost perfectly that was the cause of the outbreak.
Once you have a better handle on what these biosecurity gaps are, what do you do with it?
Part of what we developed, we learned early on when we do these outbreak investigations that you don't want to do them by just simply asking questions off a survey. Because if you do that, you're going to miss the good stuff. You're going to miss really the important things. The other thing that we put in there that we learned is, of course, the ranking, the high, medium, and low, and then the frequency of events. So, how many times did employees enter? How many times was semen delivered? Those kinds of things. That forms the database that we're going to try to use then and learn from.
What can veterinarians do at this point to assist with this program?
So we have formed what we're calling a rapid response corps, and we've selected a number of veterinarians from different parts of the country. So we took a regional approach. The idea being that we want to avoid airports, and so to get these done quickly, we need to have people close enough that they can drive, veterinarians close enough, or epidemiologists close enough that they can drive to wherever they need to conduct the investigation. And so we've got this group we're putting together now. We have a training course that they need to take and then pass a quiz at the end. So that's all happening as we speak. Our target is to get about 40 people in that rapid response corps. Now we're not limiting it to that 40 people. Any veterinarian can go to the SWCC website and visit the link that will be in the upper right-hand corner that says Rapid Response Program, and can actually go through the training program, and if you like, pass the quiz and see if you pick up the information.
And that's strictly for veterinarians?
It's actually open to anybody. We do have some academics. We have a few state animal health officials that have agreed to be part of this. Now they of course won't be compensated for doing these because of their role, but there's other individuals as well. It's not just strictly veterinarians.
What's the producer's role in all of this?
To provide the information, right? So when we go out and do these investigations, and this will be part of what we're training people to do, the two most important people at the table are the herd veterinarian and really I'll say the farm manager. They're the two most important people in addition to the facilitators then, of course. But that's who we need at the table. And so it really is, the process involves walking through, okay, again, tell us, not only how often, but what dates, prior to when the outbreak occurred that semen entered the farm, right? And so we'll walk through all that, things are related to semen entry, but we need the person there that understands how that's done. Right?
Now, farmers are an independent sort. They don't always like being told what to do. Mm-hmm. I think that's human nature. Yeah. When you identify these biosecurity gaps, I mean, how do you correct those situations on the farm? And how can you frame that for producers so that they can make these changes that are so necessary?
That is a very good point, Joe. And we're very careful when we do these PRRS outbreak investigations to always start with what our goal is, right? And our goal really is to try to identify gaps, things that we can do or that they can help them do in the future to reduce the risk of another outbreak. And it's not about finding blame or assigning blame or pointing fingers. In some cases, there are things that, until a third party from the outside comes in and sort of looks at that and says, oh, well, why are you doing that? And don't you see that could really put the farm at risk? They don't, because they're too close to it, right? And we all suffer from that. And I think I can honestly say, I don't think we've ever done one of these where, when I've had the chance to follow up and say, well, what'd you do different after that? And they've made changes. And some of them are I think are very significant changes that I really would expect and hope that it will reduce the frequency of outbreaks even with just a couple changes. What we do affects our neighbors, and what our neighbors does affects us. And it is important. I think we continually try to improve our biosecurity, not only for our benefit, but for the benefit of the industry.